Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is David Camiletti. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I love coming to Morgan County and love being on your show.
David, you're a family court judge in Martinsburg.
I'm a family court judge for Jefferson and Berkeley counties, and I'm running for circuit court judge, which is Jefferson, Berkeley, and Morgan counties.
There are 2 seats open.
There are 2 seats open, what I will call the Yoder seat, when our Judge Yoder passed away last June, and the Silver seat, where our Judge Gray Silver retired last Thanksgiving.
For the Yoder seat, who's running?
Deborah McLaughlin and David Hammer from Jefferson County.
And we interviewed them a couple weeks ago. We ran the story on Morgan County, USA. Now we're doing this other race.
This is another race. This is Division 4, so they would be in Division 2. This is the 23rd Judicial Circuit, and I and my colleagues are in Division 4. So when you go to the polls on May 8th, you'll see 2 actual judge slots that you can vote for, 1 in each, and Division 2 is the other one, and I am in Division 4 along with Kim Crockett and Steve Redding.
Right. Now, even though May 8th is primary election day, this is a final election for judges.
It is. Elections of judges changed a couple years ago. We are nonpartisan. We don't have a final election in November because, being nonpartisan, we don't need a primary. The primary is the final election. So when we get to May 8th, we need everybody that's going to show up to vote to show up that day so that we have a full turnout for our election.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You were born and raised in West Virginia. And
yes.
Give us your career history.
Can we play a little music along with this? I love a little country.
No music.
Well, rats. I was born in Morgantown back in 1956. My father was still in law school at the time. And he, to supplement the family income, because I was the 3rd child, he ran a milk route for Chico Dairy, and Chico Dairy is still there. But he moved back to Wheeling right after law school, and that's where I grew up with my 6 brothers and eventually 2 little sisters, before going back to Morgantown for my college education. Now, I got back there in '74 and ended up staying through law school, although I, sojourned from time to time, and I even stayed there to practice for a couple years in Morgantown. So by the time I was 28 and a lawyer for a couple years, I finally moved to Charleston, because in West Virginia, there's only so many places you can go to practice. You can go home. Wheeling was certainly overly crowded, or you can go to the capital, which is Charleston, and I did that for a few years before I came to the Eastern Panhandle, which is the only other place you can go in West Virginia to further yourself.
To make a living out of practicing law.
Because this is where the economy is. So that was 1992 that I came over here and immediately started practicing solo. I've almost always been a solo practitioner with a few other increments. And I took on a very heavy load of public appointments for not only criminal, but juveniles and abuse and neglect and mental hygiene. So I had a decent load right off the bat because there was nobody else here doing that at the time. There was a very small public defender's office. That was the spring that Dave Sanders was running against Pat Henry for judge, and it was a very exciting time for judicial races, as exciting as they may get. And I took on a practice that way and built one over the next 25 years. Raised a family, lived in Shepherdstown, and just kept growing and growing.
You come from a family of lawyers.
I do.
Was there family pressure for you to be a lawyer, or did you know right from the beginning, just inherently, you were going to be a lawyer?
I kind of always knew I was going to be a lawyer in a vague sense of being a kid. What are you going to do when you grow up? Well, I got to choose something. My dad's a lawyer, my grandfather's a lawyer. I guess I'll choose to be a lawyer. But that was just the local idea of the time. Perhaps more important was, looking back, the notion that I couldn't stand any bullying or any what I would term injustice. Even in grade school, I was always standing up for people or standing up for myself and making somewhat of a show. And in Catholic grade school, that was not something that was looked on as the positive behaviors, but that was my behavior. And as I went through law school, or went through college, it just became more obvious that being a lawyer was my calling, and I pursued it.
This is not your first run for circuit court judge.
No.
You ran in 2000. Tell us that story.
In 2000, and I was much younger, with darker hair, I ran against Gray Silver in the primary. Now, Pat Henry ran as well, but he was not as strong that year. But Gray and I had a very strong race. And at the end of that election in the primary, and there was no Republican candidate, Gray took Morgan County by 50 votes, thus turning the tide of the election at that time from my small lead to his small lead, and he beat me by about 30 votes. And even though I contested it and gained some ground, I did not gain 30 votes of ground, and Gray became the judge.
What was the final vote total? What did you lose by finally?
After the contest, I think it was in the mid-20s, somewhere around 23 to 26. In that
How did you become a family court judge?
They created the family court bench soon after that 2000 election. I think 2002 was the first year, and in 2015, one of the early judges, Bill Workman, decided to retire, and that opened the seat prior to an election. So just as in these more recent judicial appointments, the governor appointed me as a family court judge, and then I ran for election in 2016, and I was unopposed, but nonetheless, we held the election, and I was elected the family court judge for the 24th Circuit, and this can become confusing for folks, because that family court circuit doesn't exactly line up with our 23rd judicial court circuit. But I've been doing that for 2.5 years now, and it's been quite rewarding.
What is the work of a family court judge?
Well, we deal with divorces, of course, and custody of children. Many people do not get married these days, and therefore they don't need divorces, but they need custody arrangements and child support. And we also deal with domestic violence, and we deal with a large volume of child support enforcement. The Bureau of Child Support Enforcement has days with us where we're all day long, we do nothing but try to modulate the difficulties people have in keeping up with their child support. And that's a big part of the practice.
Being a judge and being an advocate are two separate things, and you were an advocate for most of your life.
Yes.
Then you became a judge. What's the transition like, and what makes you think now that you did in 2002, but what came into your mind that you wanted to be a judge instead of an advocate?
Well, that's several layers of questions, of course. And to answer the over question, why would I want to become a judge? Well, in this profession, I suppose you can look at it in several different ways, but I always saw the judgeship as the ultimate leaders of the profession. I may or may not be correct in that, but if you're going to be in the legal profession, you're going to have to face judges. That's pretty much how it works. And the judge has a lot of power, and that's something that we've created in our system on purpose. The judge is supposed to have a lot of power. So as I watched that process with other judges and throughout the state where I practiced, it certainly came to my mind that, well, you know, that's something that I would like to do at some time is grow into being a judge. So I made that decision early on and pursued it. Now, the second layer of that question was, so how do you make that change? Well, that's a little more difficult, especially if you've been an advocate, as I have been for nearly 35 years. You have certain tendencies to want to speak up. And one of the most important things that you will do as a judge, and whoever gets elected will find this, you have to exercise more patience than you've ever had before. More patience than you ever had being in your family, more patience than you had waiting your turn to speak in court, because you were always going to get your turn. But as a judge, you have to let others speak. It is their time in court. It might be your courtroom, but it is their time in court. And especially when they don't even have professional lawyers at their side, they need to be able to speak, and you have to be able to listen. And that's something that only comes with time.
Why are you going to be better at it than your opponents?
I certainly have more experience than my opponents. These are fine people, and I know of no disability that they would have to prevent them from taking the job. But I have been practicing probably twice as long as they have, and in more areas of law, and with a deeper practice in the law. Being a solo practitioner, in a generalist, I took pretty much anything that walked in the door. So I might be doing a heavy criminal case one time, and I did many of them, and a divorce the next day, and an abuse and neglect the day after that, or the same day, and I might be in 3 counties in one day, which I have done in the last 25 years. And I have that broader experience as long as a greater time at it, and I am a judge. And I've been a judge for 2.5 years, and there's no getting around that experience that I've been practicing as a judge for these times, and that's something that I have that they don't. So as far as candidacy goes, I have stronger background and stronger talents than they do. But we'll see how it goes.
One of your opponents, Stephen Redding, was just appointed by the governor to be a judge for this seat.
That's right.
And it struck me as a little unfair in these cases where the governor can appoint right before the election. And should the state do something about that? Should the state?
Well, you know, it's all a matter of discretion, and different governors do it different ways. You don't want to put too many parameters on the process. They developed a nice process for the governor to appoint interim judges until we get to an election. Now, in this case, might prudence have dictated that he wait the extra 60 days? Well, that's between him and his decision making, the governor, that is. So I don't see where putting more restrictions on the appointment process would benefit us. It's really a matter of the discretion of that person who's doing the appointing. So in this case, he appointed somebody, and Mr. Redding will, I believe, take the bench next week, and he'll face the election in 50 days. That's the way it goes. And I hope that he can accomplish something in that time, but I don't think that's necessary. We're already in the election process, and that's really what's going to tell the tale here is the election process.
How many votes are going to determine this election? How many votes will be cast in your election? And it's a 3-way race. So
it's a 3-way race.
How do you think it's going to fall out?
If we look back to the last election, and there were 2 judicial seats available at that election too, a new seat and the retirement of David Sanders. So there were 2 seats and 2 new judges being elected, and multiple candidates in each seat. And if I understand correctly, that turnout, and it was a May primary again, for the 3 counties was in the low 30,000 for all 3 counties, and that was 2016, the presidential year. So the draw for the primary was stronger than it is for an off year like this. So to say how many are going to, I don't want to predict, number one, a low turnout, because that would be bad juju. I don't think we need to do that. Okay? I think that we need to encourage everybody to vote. So if we know that 30,000 or so people showed up for the last election in 2016, we should encourage everybody to continue to show up and hope that we have at least that many in the 3 counties. Now, that's still not the entirety of our electorate in 3 counties. I'm sure since we're growing towards 185, 190,000 people in these 3 counties, our electorate is probably 80,000 strong, at least. I don't see where it would be any less. But that's not everybody that's registered, and that's not everybody that votes.
If you're elected, where will you sit?
Well,
and who decides
the
that?
6 judges split up the circuit as they find expedient. Over the years, there was a lot of times when the Jefferson County judge would also do Morgan County. I imagine that I'll be placed in Jefferson County by my peers. I can see where they would want me to take, as often happens with the low man on the totem pole, take matters that others have not found as pleasing for them, and that may take me to all 3 counties. So the cleanup guy might be the position that I end up taking, which is fine with me. I've been doing that all my life as the public defender and so forth. So I imagine that I'll be in Jefferson County. I imagine I'll do some work in both Berkeley and Morgan County, and we'll just have to see how it shakes out.
One of the candidates in the other race, David Hammer, is taking a position that candidates for judge should not be able to raise money, that they should just be limited to their own funds, and that because his point is, I think it's well taken, that if you're raising money from your fellow lawyers and you're not supposed to see it and you're not supposed to know where it's coming from, your committee's supposed to see it and know, but you're not supposed to know. But if you do, you actually know which lawyers are giving to you and which are not. And that puts a judge in a difficult position.
To put that in even a more fine point, in the 2000 race in Ohio County, where I am from, an incumbent judge was running, and it became unbearably noticeable that he was doing just that in the background, demanding that lawyers pony up to his campaign. And that seemed particularly ugly then, and I think it remains particularly ugly. Now, to say that judges should not be able to raise money, well, we all know where that's going to land up as far as a political race and money is involved. To say
You mean
that,
the wealthiest person wins? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying the wealthiest person wins. I'm saying that it's very difficult to get money out of politics, but a person who is independently wealthy can certainly finance his own campaign. It's not a good idea, as you have pointed out, for judicial races to be funded by the people who have to appear in front of the judge. That's problematic. So I agree with that premise. How it can be resolved, well, I don't actively go out and seek money, and I'm certainly happy if somebody donates money, but I'm not actively seeking it, partly for that reason. But I don't think that you can make a blanket statement that there should be no contributions to judicial campaigns. I think it's untenable in the sense of American politics, and I don't know how you could regulate it otherwise.
Do you, these races are nonpartisan.
That's correct.
So we don't know whether you're a Democrat, Republican, and independent. We're not supposed to know.
True.
But people know politics.
Yes.
People can sense it. We know that Governor Justice nominated Stephen Redding to be a judge.
Yes.
So that's a political move.
Yes.
So we can't really take the politics out of it.
Correct.
But you still think it's a good idea to have nonpartisan elections. Why?
Oh, my.
Why?
It's a move that was been coming for years and should have been done long ago. The judges of all elected, and they're not elected everywhere, you know, as well. There's some places judges are just appointed.
But in West
this,
Virginia, they're elected.
We're elected. And the more politics that we can take out of judicial elections, the better off everybody is in anybody who has to appear in the judicial system, litigants, lawyers, any other stakeholders. It's just a better plan not to be identified or to run under a party affiliation, especially in these times. If judges are supposed to be truly nonpartisan or impartial and fair, then aligning themselves with the political climate that has pervaded for these last 20 years, I think would be complete hypocrisy. How can you say that you're going to be fair and open and impartial, yet you are completely aligned with one of the fractious parties or their elements, which are anything but fair and equitable? They, by their definitions and by their own vocalizations, are very, very identified with very small areas of our population. Well, that's no way to be a judge.
Well, you're traveling the district with a pickup truck that has your sign on it that you helped build. We saw you at Roy's this morning. 7 weeks to the election. We're out of time actually, but 7 weeks until election. The election's May 8th.
Yes.
It's not a primary election for judges, it's the final
It's
election.
the final, yeah. This is
And
our
and
only
we'll
shot.
post this interview and the
thank
other
you.
interviews we do on Morgan County, USA. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it. Thank
David
you all.
Camiletti. And thank you so much for watching This Week in Morgan County.